Well, I'm joined now from London by the SNP's Philippa Whitford and Labour's Ian Murray. Well, Philippa, first of all, given that European leaders have made it clear that they'll only negotiate with the UK government, what was the point in your Brexit minister's visit to Brussels today?
Well, I think it's really important that they understand the view in Scotland. We clearly voted to remain, and we want to make that clear. We consider ourselves European, and we're looking similarly for an imaginative way of achieving that.
But what tangible difference will it make? It's all very well to get sympathy from people in Europe, but speaking to a group of MEPs isn't going to make the blindest bit of difference.
Well, I think you have to speak to everyone. You speak to MEPs, we're speaking to political members within different countries, within the EU itself. I think it's really important that Scotland is there. And one of the things is that, as was said by your previous interviewee, is that they do look upon Scotland friendly. They see that we voted in a totally different way. Now, it is the UK that is the member state, and that's the situation that we're in at the moment.
But none of the people they've spoken to today have any real influence over the negotiation process.
But you have to build that influence with lots of different people. And it's important that our ministers are out there. If we just don't go anywhere, then it's, right, OK, tough. Doesn't matter how Scotland voted. Wonder why you bothered voting. You're coming with us.
Well, Ian Murray, as Scotland's only Labour MP, why aren't you across in Brussels trying to secure the best deal for Scotland?
Well, actually, we do have representatives through the Council of Europe, and indeed our former Chief Whip, Rosie Winterton, is talking to our Socialist and Democratic colleagues in the Socialist and Democratic group at the European Parliament at the moment, trying to discuss the best way forward for the UK and to try to build those alliances. Philippa Whitford's absolutely right. You've just got to talk to people in Brussels. You've got to build those relationships, and you've got to make sure the message gets across. But I think from what we've just seen from the VT at the start of this piece, and indeed from your expert in the European Parliament, is that nobody really knows where we are at the moment, and the difficulty with having Scotland in the single market and the UK not in the single market is this issue of immigration and borders and free movement of people. You can't have one without the other. So there's a whole host of issues to be dealt with, and it's quite right there's people over there talking to people, building those relationships and building those alliances, because it's quite clear that when it comes to the final decision, it's only going to be the member state that the European Parliament, the European Union will deal with. But it's absolutely right for the Labour Party, for the Liberal Democrats and for the SNP to be talking to our allies in Europe.
Well, the problem, Philippa Whitford, with the member state, that is being the UK obviously dealing with this, is that Number 10 has indicated in just the past few days that Scotland would not have a separate deal on membership of the single market, nor would it have new powers over immigration. So it sounds like Nicola Sturgeon's threat of holding a second independence referendum isn't being viewed as credible in Downing Street.
Well, whether it's not being viewed as credible or whether Number 10 doesn't care, that's the other possibility. But I think that it's important that through this coming 2 years, we keep working on this and we keep bringing ideas forward. The EU is immensely pragmatic. They accepted the unification of Germany and 18 million new members overnight. They have worked out solutions before, and it's important that we try and convince them to work out a solution now.
One of those solutions, Ian Murray, and we read about this in the newspapers, that the City of London could come to a separate deal and have membership of the single market, whereas the rest of the UK wouldn't. If that happened, surely they'd have to do the same for Scotland as well.
Well, there's an issue about goods and services, isn't there? The problem with having it on a nation-state basis, and I don't disagree with the premise of your question, is that you have to take the rules and the regulations that go with access to the single market. One of those big rules and regulations, of course, is free movement of people. And if you have a different immigration policy in Scotland, you therefore have to have a border with England. I'm not sure that's either desirable or workable. And I think we've got to find a solution that means that Scotland can benefit from being part of the UK single market, but also get the advantages of the EU. Nobody quite knows at the moment what that looks like, but it would be absolutely wrong for Scotland to turn away from the UK single market in order to join the EU single market, when in actual fact the UK one's much more important. If financial services are looking for a separate deal, that'll be certainly on services and on financial transactions, and that may work slightly differently from actually having a physical nation-state being in a different place that the rest of the UK would not be.
But what about our financial services companies here in Scotland? What about securing a good deal for them?
Well, they absolutely do need to be given a good deal, and I've raised this point in the House a number of times this week about protecting not just our financial services sector, but the big sectors in Scotland: oil and gas, food and drink, and indeed our wonderful higher education sector. These are the kinds of arguments we need to be having and the kind of things that the Prime Minister needs to take on board. But there's a really important point here, and this shows maybe where this Prime Minister differs from the previous Prime Minister. The Labour opposition brought a pretty much identical motion about protecting EU nationals to the House on the 6th of July. The Conservatives abstained on that, so it went through by 245 votes to 2 in favour. Today, the SNP brought an identical motion. The motion was voted on and the Conservatives voted against it under the new Prime Minister in terms of protecting EU nationals. So I don't know if that's actually a shift in thinking or it is indeed just a tactic in Parliament. What it does show, though, is that EU nationals look as though they're going to play a bargaining chip, and I think that's completely wrong.
Well, Philippa, just talking about that debate this afternoon on EU nationals, I mean, you're asking the government to ensure that all EU nationals living in the UK retain their current rights. But isn't that unreasonable until we get a reciprocal agreement from the EU on Britons living abroad?
No, I don't think it is. It's the UK that has created the instability. So we're the ones that actually have to make the first move. And frankly, I think if we had been gracious, literally the day or week after the vote, and said everyone who's already here can stay, the other countries in Europe would have responded. When I've met with the German ambassador, with politicians in Berlin, they have said that it never even occurred to them that they would ask British people to leave. It's us that should be gracious and make the first move.
But why do you focus on EU nationals living here? Surely you should be standing up for Scots living abroad, and that should be your priority.
Well, I think the best way to achieve security for them is by us being gracious. The people I'm in contact with who live in Europe say that actually there was no comment, no sense of insecurity at all until we started using the language that there would be this bargain backwards and forwards. So I think it's up to us. If we had made that confirmation right at the beginning for people who may have lived here for years or decades, contributing to our society, then we would have actually done the best to secure our citizens. There's people stuck in limbo who are coming to see me, who can't get mortgages, who can't get business loans, because lenders will say, well, I can't guarantee you'll be here for 25 years.
Well, Ian Murray, might this not be a problem in the end? So we had the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, today indicating that highly skilled workers may be exempt from the government's planned immigration controls. Would that satisfy you?
Well, look, it's right that the government, and Philippa Whitford's also right on this, that they should just come out very clearly and say that people who are currently living here in the United Kingdom should be allowed to stay, and anyone, indeed, over 5 years who've been here from the European Union, I'd be encouraging them to go for permanent residency before we leave the European Union, because it's absolutely critical to our economy. 25% of all staff at Edinburgh University's Science King's buildings
to do, Ian. That's
is here.
the problem.
Well, it is expensive, but I think the government might have to come to some accommodation to enable that to happen. It's absolutely right for the government to say that, and if they're not going to be completely explicit in that, that equally people who are living abroad from the United Kingdom should be protected, and we should be fighting their corner as well in your previous question. It's just the right thing to do morally, and people who are contributing to our society, people who have been living here a long time, should be allowed to stay.
Ian Murray and Philippa Whitford, thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.